Yo, sexy dudes. Let's have a go at what we can call comments. I'll work through them this way, I think. Yeah. First of all is from yesterday's video and other videos, what we're going to do about it. Hey, what we're going to do about it? This problem, this money problem, this banking problem, this debt problem, etc. Now, one of the favorite ideas coming out from people like the Occupy people is take the money from the 1% because they've got loads of it. They've got loads of money. So take it from them. The question comes, okay, here's the question. Why? As in, you've got lots, let's say you do it. The government, and it'd have to be the American government, that decides that there is a problem and they could do with lots of money, and they're going to take lots of money, say $1 trillion from the richest people in the United States. Okay. You've got to go along, first you've got to go a long way to get $1 trillion, even off rich people, a really long way. But the question arises, okay, now you've got this $1 trillion, you American government, what you're going to do with it? And before you can know what you're going to do with it, you've got to work out what the actual problem is. Yeah? There's no point having just taking the money just for no particular reason. You've got to know what then to do with it to solve another problem. And this is what we've got to establish, what the other problem is that, say, $1 trillion could go some way towards ameliorating, relieving. Right, I'll go on to a quick note what the main problem is. There's too much debt and the economy isn't good enough for those debts to be repaid easily enough. And that's it. Okay, we'll leave it there. Okay, yeah, too much debt and the economy isn't good enough for those debts to be repaid. And the economy isn't good enough because people are worried about those debts not being repaid. The banks aren't lending this extra amount of money into the economy, so money is too tight in the economy because the banks aren't lending because they know people are tight for money. It's a ridiculous situation, but there we are. Okay, and that knocks the demand side of the economy. There aren't that great amount of going out and buying jet skis anymore. Yeah. Right, let's go to Ricardo's question from yesterday, where I was saying that the creditors want to be paid back in good solid money that's worth every dollar of the dollar, and the debtors just want to pay them. You know, most everybody are decent people and they do want to pay their debts back, but if the powers that be could make it easier for them to pay debts back, whatever way that might be, they're in for whatever that might be, because they do want to pay their debts back, and they're not really too fussed about where the extra money might come from, as long as it comes to them so they can pay their debts off, so they can do the honourable thing. Ricardo's question is, and then very importantly, where do the banks stand on this question of what would they prefer? Would they prefer good solid money, every dollar to be a dollar, or would they prefer any old thing to happen as long as the debts get paid back? And obviously it's more of the second. Sure, I'll leave it there. I could leave it there, couldn't I? That does get a bit complicated, but we can think of the banks as debtors, as in they would like the government to spend in more money for stimulus and the central bank to spend in more money on quantitative easing. So there's plenty of liquidity going on. But that's only the quantitative easing one is only psychological. Quantitative easing in a way is good for the government, but it really doesn't do the banks much any good at all. All it does for them is make their books good enough so they won't be wound up in the next year. Basically, it keeps them going. The accountants can pass it through because they've got cash on their asset side and not what might be called dodgy securities assets. You know, like mortgage-backed securities, the Fed has taken 1.25 trillion off the bank's books, that sort of thing. It's better that they had that 1.25 trillion on their books than the mortgage-backed securities, because they might have been written down. If they were doing any mark-to-market, which they're not at the moment, but if they were, that the value of those might be written down by the accountants, and that would be knocking down the value of the asset side with the liability side staying up, which means that the bank is moving towards insolvency. So they're happier with the cash on their balance sheet, but they're not going to be lending that to you, me, or the next door neighbour or anybody else, because they know that no bank is lending, so there's not much money in the economy. So there aren't many people spending, so there's not much movement of money, and debts would be harder to repay in that situation. So they're not going to lend it in the first place. Right. Go on to Johnny. Now, in his comment, which I think is a huge move for him, I respect Johnny as probably the biggest thinker on these things. I'm not going to say the best thinker, because that doesn't go generally along. I think he and I probably do more thinking about this sort of stuff than anybody else, which just makes us sad dudes, really very sad at all, you know. But we do a lot of thinking about it, but just because you do a lot of thinking about it doesn't mean that you've got the best answers. Somebody that gives it 5 minutes thought can come up with better answers. But I think it hurts somebody like Johnny, because he would like things to be one way, but can see that the world just isn't that way, you know. And he's moved towards at least considering the Steve Keen idea as maybe not a bad one. You know, it's gone up into the top bracket of, I really can't see too much better than this, because it is this demand side problem that the people just aren't buying enough things anymore to keep the economy going. So the idea would be that the government, which would drive Johnny mad, would somehow have to get money into the economy, paying money to everybody to keep it fair. Otherwise, if you just paid it to the debtors, the moral hazard and the just basic natural human unfairness of that would be unbearable. So you pay the money to everybody, so some it sticks with and they can buy a new jet ski, and others are forced to pay down their debt. So now we flop right back to the beginning, and we can mix that with the 1% thing and say, we've been through the video now, we know roughly where the problems are. Would it be worth, instead of making up new money via the central bank, doing a deal with the central bank, or the government just saying, this is now the law, the government is the government, they can say what the hell they like, this is now the law, and every year we're allowed to just spend into the economy $1 trillion if we want to. They're the law, they can do anything they like. So you can say that the government just spends it in, or if you did not like that idea and thought that would lead to Weimar Germany before you can say Bibble, the money has to come from the economy. So take that, whatever amount of money that you want to spread to everybody else that's indebted and everybody else in the economy to balance that out morally and fairly. You take that from the richest 1% and spread that around and see how far that would go. Now, I don't think that would go very far, but it would go some way. To take the, say, $1 trillion from, you just start at the top, whoever's the richest, and keep going down and take a certain amount, you know, a huge amount from the richest, and going down to somebody who's only got 5 million, you would only take 3 million from them, or whatever, at least until you had your $1 trillion, and then you spread that $1 trillion among everybody in the country. The trouble is, I don't think $1 trillion goes very far. 1 trillion divided by 300,000 for the United States, for instance, work it out yourself. And then you've got the problem, well, that seemed to be working, let's do it again. The well has been sucked dry. It would be a one-hit wonder, realistically. And it would be a terrible kick in the gonads for the American dream. It would be the end of white male America. Now, you might say that's not a bad thing, that it would be the end of white male America. But white male America would hate this as an idea. Even if they were terribly indebted. The polls are quite amazing on, I'll use a proxy sort of thing, a poll of white males in the United States. They are overwhelmingly in favour of keeping the inheritance laws, the figure before it hits somewhere up 5 million. They were polled, wouldn't it be better if we brought it down to 3 million or 1 million? And they said absolutely not. Even if they're, real blue collar, 35,000 a year workers, they are still in some little corners of their imagination still living the American dream, that one day they will hit it big and they will be a big earner and they will be able to pass on their glorious established wealth onto their little poxy children. If you did the 1% thing, it would wipe that out completely and America would never be the same again. But maybe that is what the world needs to move on from what was the American dream of white male America and move into a more egalitarian sort of regime. But it wouldn't half cause a lot of fuss. Comments if you feel so fit. Bye.